All right. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I have a few reminders while folks are still joining before we get started. We like to keep our webinars conversational and welcome your questions throughout. You can send the questions to the panel through the Q&A button located on your Zoom control panel. We will try to answer as many questions as we can live, but if we don't get to your question, we'll be sure to follow up afterwards. You can follow today's conversation on Twitter, as we'll be live tweeting throughout the webinar at Rio_SEO and using the hashtag Rio webinar. Finally, we will send a link to the webinar recording within the next 24 hours, so look out for a follow-up email from our marketing team. Rio SEO recently conducted the first of what will be an annual survey to gain a deeper understanding of how consumer behavior has evolved during the pandemic. The responses we received from local consumers helped shed light on several key areas, including how consumers most frequently conduct online searches, the impact of reviews and ratings on the decision-making process, which platforms are most frequently used as part of the local shopping journey, and how COVID-19 has reshaped the buyer's journey. Today, I'm joined by two great panelists who will help share the most impactful findings from the study and how to apply them to your local marketing strategy to emerge from the pandemic stronger and more prepared. My name is Mick Wilson. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success at Rio SEO, and will be moderating today's discussion. Joining me today are Ryan Weber, who's a Director of Customer Success at Rio SEO, and Doug Gagaro, who's an Account Director at Rio. Ryan, Doug, I'm glad to have you here. Thank you for joining. Hope you're having some sunny weather in Southern California. Do you want to just give a brief intro, Ryan? And then we'll go to Doug.
Sure. Thank you, Mick. The sun is out today. I see blue skies out the window, which is always welcome. I'm actually based in Los Angeles. I've been on the client success team here at Rio for a little over 6 years, and I've been in digital marketing for over 10 years, where I focused on everything from e-commerce to restaurant delivery and, of course, local search. So looking forward to sharing the results of the study with everyone today.
Awesome. And yeah, hi, everyone. This is Doug Gargaro. I'm in Carlsbad, California. Beautiful sunny day today. Just moved into this community after buying a new home here recently. So really excited to be here. I've been at Rio for 2 years now, 2+ years as an account director. I've been in digital and specifically enterprise SEO for over 10 years. And a lot of that time focused directly on local SEO and local search. So really looking forward to the discussion today. Nice to meet everyone.
All right. Well, once again, thanks everyone for joining us today. We're excited to go through the material we have. And again, we'll follow up with a recording as well as the study if needed. So going to the next slide, I just wanted to give a little brief background on the methodology of the study. So Rio polled a random sample of more than 1,000 consumers of diverse age groups, genders, regions across the United States, as well as devices. Questions focused on consumers' local search behavior, including the impact of business reviews and online reputation, as well as COVID-19's transformational changes, such as curbside pickup and virtual services. You can see the breakdown on this slide. So to start today's discussion, we're gonna focus on the search discovery key findings. We found a large percentage of respondents turned to Google search as their search engine of choice to learn more about nearby businesses. Knowing that Google has led the pack for quite a while, is it worthwhile for businesses to focus their local marketing efforts on other platforms as well? And what considerations would you recommend brands make when considering which platforms to focus on? Ryan, why don't we, can you start us off?
Sure. Yeah, it's no real surprise here, seeing Google, both search and maps, come out ahead of every other vertical. We know just by usage data that that's to be expected. I think, what's interesting when you think about it by vertical is beyond, well, Google is basically going to be number one for every vertical, right? But if you're, for example, home service brand, platform like Nextdoor might be more relevant. If you're in the restaurant vertical, spending some extra time on Yelp is certainly going to, pay dividends. I think, expanding from there, even thinking about, beyond the list that we have here, if you're, a healthcare brand, for example, there's obviously healthcare specific verticals. Same thing is true for law firms, right? But at the end of the day, I think, when you're kind of looking at where to focus your efforts, where to spend your time, Google is certainly number one. And once you've, checked every box, fully optimized your listing there, I think it makes sense to start to move into some of these other verticals as time allows.
Great, thank you. Another key finding is that 84% of respondents expect the information on a brand's website and Google My Business listing to be accurate and up to date. How can a multi-location brand ensure their listings are up to date across all locations? And what are some of the most common missed opportunities or inconsistencies we typically observe? Doug, did you want to jump in to start?
Yeah, sure. I think this is a case where listing completeness and really focusing strong effort around maximizing listing completeness on Google. Google My Business being first and foremost as a foundational platform that the rest of your local search and local SEO strategy is built on, is really kind of the key. And then from there. And by the way, doing this at scale for brands that have, 10, 50, 500 or more locations, not necessarily, it's a formidable task. It's not easy, right? So doing that at scale, obviously I recommend leveraging a partner with a platform that can handle that kind of data management at scale again. And to really focus on consistency. But then from there, taking the next step is taking that data for the core listings and distributing that across the local web, leveraging the major search aggregators and also leveraging automation tools like API connections to the other major platforms out there beyond GMB. So, Bing and Apple Maps and Yelp and so on and so forth, because that consistency of data is really very key to just ensuring that even Google doesn't start to question the accuracy of the listings and then start to suppress those listings in the search results, right? So it all kind of builds together to create this highly accurate and highly complete picture of the listing data.
Yeah, one other thing I think is so interesting about this question is the way the results came in, that the respondents actually, basically, if you're reading it this way, they expect Google to be more accurate than the brand's own website, which I think is really interesting. I mean, obviously, for SMBs, what that tells you is the first place, right, you should be going to make updates is GMB, even before your own website. And I think we probably have all run into that at some point with an SMB, that maybe the information is actually is correct on Google and not accurate on the brand's website. But at the enterprise level, Doug, as you said, you most likely are using a platform that's going to be pushing out the same information to all of these sources. So it's always going to be consistent. But I just found that fascinating, that respondents basically pegged Google to be more accurate than the brand's own website.
Right. And it's not really any accident either. I think Google has worked really hard to, repurpose and kind of take control of a brand's presence on their own, on Google-owned properties, including local listings, and really kind of making that the primary source of information for most users on the Google platform. Something that, you know, brands that are savvy and aware of that are not necessarily happy about, but it's kind of the reality of playing the game and working within Google's established, you know, contextual framework, right? And being able to play and win on that platform. But again, I think it's, to me, it's not really surprising, because I feel that Google has just made such an effort to sort of, you know, move in that direction over the past few years.
Yeah, and I think consumers know that Google, you know, sources information about a business from many different places, right? And meshes the data that they find together in the search results, that sometimes there's some additional attributes or bits of information that might not even be available on the brand's website potentially. So
Very true.
I think there's just a level of you know, trust there built up over time. So great. So moving on here, our survey also indicated that most searches are seeking you know, basic details about a business, NAP, name, address, phone, related information, as well as other high intent queries such as online ordering and promotions. How can brands optimize listings and pages to rank for these queries, especially in the case of branded queries where a searcher maybe already maybe made their mind up already? Ryan, you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, this is a really interesting one. I think you know, to answer your question specifically around, you know, how do you improve visibility and ranking? Obviously, the first piece is the sort of foundational data accuracy, right? That we've been talking about so far. That's the address, the contact info, the website, hours of operation. But where it gets interesting, and where you start thinking about, you know, actual conversions, right? Converting these searches into actual sales or purchases. Things you can do with the listing, like Google Post, for example, right? So if it's a promotional post that's talking about the latest in-store offer, or even something that can be, you know, purchased through an e-commerce channel, adding that to the listing, I think speaks to this, you know, 33%, 31% that's looking for, how do I actually transact with you through this listing? Beyond that, depending on your vertical, you have you know, options for actually integrating your product inventory, right? So if you're a retailer, you can, through, you know, Merchant Center account, be feeding actual in-store inventory to Google for use in, you know, local inventory ads. But there's also a component of the listing called See What's in Store that will allow searchers to actually browse in stock items and place an order directly through Google, which just, you know, removes a lot of the friction from that transaction. And we do see that consumers, you know, to a relatively large degree, are looking for and kind of expecting that type of information. The same thing on the restaurant vertical, right? You can integrate to actually facilitate an online order for takeout or delivery through an interface that Google powers, right? You can also, at the very least, syndicate your menu, which every restaurant should be taking advantage of that. It's a, basically, it's free, you know, promotional space that we know these GMB listings are getting so much visibility. To make sure that you've got your products, your menu items displayed there, I think is critical to converting as much of that traffic as you possibly can.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Do you have anything to add, Doug?
You know what? I think Ryan just covered that so well. You know, I think he covered all the bases. All I would add there is that, you know, when you are leveraging these different you know, listing information opportunities like Google Posts, like product inventory, even inventory or e-commerce product feeds on pages that, you know, on your actual location and locator pages. This data is fed into local listings that surface in search results, right? So it, you know, on top of just having all of these, you know, these opportunities to interact with the brand directly within the Google listing. You also have the enhanced conversion or not just conversion, but really click-through opportunity, where you have rich snippets that are surfacing in to local listings to say, hey, what you searched for is available nearby, that pair of shoes, or that, accessory from Home Depot, whatever it may be that you're shopping for. So making use of all of these opportunities and really maximizing those, the data that's available, and making sure that it's in as many of these places as possible. It only helps to drive users to your listings, and then it makes it easier for them to actually convert when they get there. So anyway, that's all I have to add.
Great. Well, it's a good addition. Thank you. So moving forward here, kind of got a breakdown on verticals, and there's some interesting findings here. Most respondents of the survey indicated they're searching for information related to retailers, but several of the verticals ranked highly. Have we observed any behavioral changes in other verticals, perhaps a result related to the pandemic?
One that comes to mind for me, the outside of retail and restaurants, and the ones that we all kind of know, top of mind, I think, in the real estate financing vertical. I've got a client who essentially had a record year through the pandemic, all right, and many of the steps involved in becoming pre-qualified and purchasing a home, I know both from working with that client and working, in my own personal home purchase, that so much of those processes have moved from in-person interactions and meetings and signings and things like that to a digital format and process of some form or another. Even the case of people buying homes 100% based on virtual walkthroughs and virtual tours and things like that. So definitely, I think there are verticals out there, many verticals really, that have seen behavior changes across their audiences, right? And that's just one example that I could think of above and beyond.
Yeah, I think the results here, I think we would all agree that financial services probably got a lift because of changes through the pandemic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ryan, what else maybe jumps out? I think restaurants and hotels potentially were impacted more negatively during the pandemic, and that could have an impact on some of the results we're seeing too. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree, especially with that last point. I think this is really pandemic influenced, right? Seeing retail, outstripping everyone else, and especially seeing hotels that low. I mean, I just think of, in my own experience, and I know for many others, that travel over the last 18 months has been sort of, more on the back burner, right? Has been less of a focus. And so I think you could say the same about restaurants, right? We've kind of shifted. It's starting to come back. It's different in different parts of the country where restrictions are kind of shifting. But I think to your point, Mick, that these numbers are likely pandemic influence to a degree, and we know that this is going to be an annual survey. I'm very curious to see how this shifts over the next 12 months as things hopefully get back to a semblance of normal.
Agree. So it'll be interesting as we go on here, how things shift over time. So moving to the next slide, a big finding here is, and it's not surprising, but just reaffirms that the importance of local search. 90% of the survey respondents plan to make a purchase within a week or sooner of their initial search. How can brands capitalize on this from a local strategy perspective, knowing that most searchers have high buying intent? Ryan, would you like to lead us off?
Sure. Yeah, I think this, relates to the slide before last as well, where we're talking about, what else can you do beyond just the basic name, address, phone number. This is where, making sure that you have those calls to action present in that listing. I think, we'll shift gears in the next section to reputation, but I think that plays a big role here as well, to make sure that you're, monitoring and responding to reviews, so that as a customer is looking, right, and is comparing local retailers or restaurants, or whatever the vertical is, making sure you've got that complete and optimized profile. You're taking part in the conversation by responding to reviews. I think all of those elements are critical.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Doug, anything else on this one?
I felt that this overlapped a lot with that prior question as well. And I think we covered a lot of those, those opportunities to really just take advantage of the fact that the buyer intent is so high with local search in general, right? And so everything that we talked about, product feed, product inventory, products on location pages, making sure that services, that are available are clearly defined in the listings. Anything that's gonna give users the opportunity to take the next step and interact and transact with the business. And I think that we definitely covered a lot of those so far in the discussion.
Yeah, I think in certain verticals, order now is available, like in the restaurant industry, or there's appointment booking solutions in certain verticals as well, even financial services that a consumer can initiate an appointment right from a Google
exactly
listing. Those types of things, taking advantage of those features can really mean a lot for your business.
100%.
Yeah, and I think just layering in some external data from Google as well that sort of speaks to this. If we look at search volume for things like whatever the product is, followed by in stock, right? That type of query increased 70% over the last year. And another one, the where to buy type queries increased 200%, right? And that's a trend that we've seen even before COVID, but I think that the pandemic sort of added some fuel to the growth rate for both of those types of searches. So again, we know the intent is there. It's just a question of making sure you've got the right sort of landing experience and conversion experience to capture as much of that demand as possible.
Yeah, I think this particular slide and topic or finding lines up well with a question that just came in. What can retailers do who are pure plays online e-commerce sites that don't have a local experience? I can just start off. I think that based on knowing that local search has a high intent, take advantage of that by being available from a SEO standpoint, with highlighting quick search, free shipping, very fast shipping, that type of thing, or making, depending on what type of business you are, making virtual services or contacting your company to find more information out very, very easy and seamless. Any other thoughts there on that question? Just, obviously the study was focused on local, but any other things that jump to mind?
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of at a slight disadvantage when it comes to just the real estate, right? For any type of product, and not knowing the vertical, it's kind of tough to say. But if it's a pure play online retailer, you miss out on that map pack, right? Those local results that show up first. But so does Amazon, right? So it's not to say that you can't still compete. I think a big thing that I would recommend looking at really is the content of the pages, right? Because at that point you're competing for the next 10 blue links, right, that appear in the organic results. I think having really well built out product detail pages that have great content about the product, Also having reviews, right? Product level reviews or brand level reviews that you can mark up with structured data, I think will give you a leg up in terms of visibility.
You know, I would I would add to that. I think there's an opportunity to leverage, you know, if it's done correctly and strategically and thoughtfully, I think leveraging localized content. If you're a brand that's pure e-commerce, but you certainly are available in prominent communities across the country or whatever the geographic areas you're targeting, building out local organic content pages that speak to people looking for that product or service in that geo-targeted area is certainly a valid SEO strategy and can help you, you know, both rank and convert for some of those longer tail, high buyer intent, localized phrases that will, you know, the theory being that if you do it with skill and do an effective job at it, you'll be ranking in the local organic SERPs below that 3-pack, right? And so I do think that I've actually seen enterprise brands take on that strategy and significantly increase the revenue from organic search. So, you know, we're talking about pure e-commerce brands, right? So I definitely think that's an opportunity as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, Doug. And it kind of made me think of another sort of use case, and it may or may not apply to this specific, the person who asked this specific question. But if you are, if you don't own any of your own sort of retail outlets, but you are selling through other retailers, obviously you can't create GMB listings for those, but what you can do on your own site is create almost a, where to buy or where to find locator tool that allows you to create, pages at the city level where your products are available. And again, it's not, you don't own the brick and mortar space, but you still can provide value to consumers by telling them where they can find your product. So that's another sort of local angle. And I think to Doug's point about creating that localized content, having that kind of where to buy flow is a sensible place to for that localized content to live under your domain.
That's a great example. Definitely agree with that.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. I'm going to switch gears here now and explore our findings around online reputation management. Star rating and number of reviews were found to be the most important factors in instilling confidence with the respondents of the survey. Why do you think those two factors outrank review recency and review sentiment? Ryan, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's interesting that these two sort of outstrip the others. From a consumer standpoint, it's the most obvious and easiest thing to grab, right? If you're scanning a list of results in the map list or in the map pack, star rating jumps out, the total number of reviews jump out. It's the easiest thing to sort of quickly compare the 3 or 10, 20 results that you're looking at. And so it makes sense. I think the other thing is if we think of sort of star rating as a proxy for quality, right? It's not always exactly matching the offline experience, but as consumers, we tend to rank it fairly highly. So using that as a quick glance to give me a sense of the quality of the location and the product or the experience. And then for number of reviews, that's basically the indication of the popularity, right? So combining the two things, having a very popular location doesn't always indicate quality, right? So if you've got 1,000 reviews, but the average rating is 2 stars, I'm probably going to keep looking, right, until I find one that's maybe 4.5 stars. So I think as a brand, we want to make sure that we're balancing those two things, the popularity and the quality.
Right. Yeah, I think consumers have become pretty savvy and realize that maybe if there's a low, just a couple of reviews for a particular location that it can be taken with a grain of salt to some degree versus, having, 400 or 500 reviews to get that better sample, sample of people's experiences, if you will. Doug, any thoughts?
Again, I think Ryan really summarized it well. My thoughts are very aligned there. What I would add is just that, another way that I look at that is that number of reviews, popularity is a great way to describe it. I think it's also an immediate signal of authority in the space, and just the, kind of the volume of business that the brand is doing, which in and of itself is an indicator of trust, right? And then the other thing to consider there is that if the volume is high enough, if the star rate, it's going to be very easy to kind of take away, is the brand consistently performing well among its clients' perception, or is it not? Because even with the odd negative review, if the volume is high and the star rating is still 4.5, approaching 5 stars, then that odd negative review really doesn't mean a lot. It's an exception, not the rule. But on the other hand, and I think Ryan even mentioned this, that if you've got thousands of reviews and your average rating is 2.5 stars, then you're consistently under delivering, right? So it's just very easy to take those 2 data points and get a picture of how well that brand is performing.
Yeah, and just one question came in that really ties to this finding in particular. Someone asked, what is the difference between star rating and review sentiment? Which I think, it's a great question. I think the biggest takeaway there in the difference between the two is that sometimes people will leave a star rating without any text, right? Or there'll be times where someone will say leave a 4-star review, but their content is of their review is very, very negative, or just the opposite, maybe a low star rating, but then their text, review text, talks about a great experience they had. And so, star rating is just the numbers, if you will, right? The average of the stars, whereas sentiment is the true meaning of the content of the actual reviews itself.
That makes sense. That's good clarification.
I think the sort of the sweet spot there where sentiment becomes really important is from 2.5 to 3.5 stars, right in the middle, where every individual kind of maybe has their own rating scale, right, or their own level of expectations. And so it could be, a 3-star review, but they had positive things to say about the experience, whereas the opposite could also be true, right? So I think that's where sentiment comes in. And maybe what this response speaks to is that while consumers do tend to read reviews, that even more important than that, or certainly the first thing you see again, is that star rating and the number of reviews. You really have to kind of go a step further to get into that sentiment piece, and it just takes a little bit more time, a little more effort on the part of the consumer. But we know that the content of the reviews is also incredibly important as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very good point. One other question we'll just jump on really quick. We've got a webinar attendees from Canada based in Toronto, and the data in our survey is US based, but she's asking how we feel this lines up with Canada. My personal opinion, I'm Canadian myself, so I feel like, and just from different studies we've done in the past, I feel it lines up very similarly. I would imagine the results of the survey, if we were to do it just in Canada or had a mix of Canada and US participants, would be very, very similar. I don't see anything that we covered that would be vastly different. Do you agree, Ryan and Doug? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, agreed. I think maybe the average average star ratings are a little higher in Canada than they are in the US, but I think other than
Canada
that,
nice,
yeah,
right?
right.
Are you
Other
saying
than that,
Canadian
it'd be
people are
pretty,
more polite than Americans?
exactly. I'm just basing this on my experience with Mick, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't really have anything to add to that because I find it pretty equivalent, right, in my experience. But you know, I believe you that Canadian people are more polite, have better manners.
All right. Well, thanks for those questions. Moving along here, we also found that 75% of local consumers agree that first-party reviews, which are reviews that are displayed on a brand's own website, are likely to influence the purchasing decision. Why are first-party reviews just as impactful as third-party reviews? Where is the best place for businesses to display first-party reviews? And how can a brand get started in that regard? Doug, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. What comes to mind for me with first party reviews is that in order for a brand to publish those, they generally have to have, or should, and may need to really have a process in place where they get permission, and the reviews that they publish are done, they're published with the direct permission of the clients and customers that they have. And so it's just a bit of a more direct pulse on the customer experience, and it may just be psychologically perceived as being a slightly more reliable indicator of client experience and sentiment than third-party reviews. Although it does surprise me if first-party reviews are coming in as a stronger indicator. I wouldn't necessarily have assumed that would be the case, but for me, that's the logic that I would apply to try to explain that. And it makes sense to a degree. Oftentimes when I've seen first-party reviews published on brand sites, it's done with a message that says something along the lines of 100% verified or whatever. And so that is just a strong signal to people that, hey, I can trust the content that they're, and trust the authenticity of these reviews. To the questions about where to prominently publish first party reviews, I think that's that answer. I think there's a couple of different answers to that. I mean, there's a couple of different options for that. I think obviously if we're talking about local presence, we would want to make those reviews prominently available on the location page for a given location, and or maybe just bring in snippets or summaries of a few reviews, and then have a dedicated but prominently linked page to aggregate reviews across all of the brand's locations, so that people can really do a deep dive search and kind of get a feel for the review sentiment there. And I don't know if was there another bullet point on that question that I missed?
Just how can a brand get started?
Okay. Yeah.
If they aren't doing first party reviews.
And obviously working with a partner like Rio, we've got solutions that we can work with brands to essentially make publishing first party reviews available to customers directly on our clients, our locator pages and so on. I think Ryan, you have a little bit more experience in that realm. I think I'm going to toss it to you and get your thoughts on exactly how to get started and what the best solutions are for that.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Sorry for the background noise. My dog is on guard duty at the moment, so
oops. Okay.
Yeah, I think going back to the sort of question around implementation, and there's two main channels, right, that you can use to collect these. So displaying them and using them as a kind of ranking and conversion tool is kind of the end result, but the first step obviously is to collect the feedback in the first place. And so I think, Doug, to your point, you almost need to partner with a software provider that can help do this. And so the two main channels would be, proactive outreach, right? Whether you're sending a follow-up to, every new customer that completes a purchase, via email or SMS, requesting them to leave a review. And the other sort of channel is actually on your website, right? On your store location pages is probably the most logical place to have this displayed. And as far as trends go, we're seeing, I think, more examples of this, and I think it's going to continue to ramp up, where you see, as part of that store locator experience, not only those native first party reviews, but also the ability to leave a new review, right? And from a consumer standpoint, it's a great way to be heard, to sort of complete that purchase journey, right, as part of the follow up after purchase. But from a brand standpoint, again, these are great ways to effectively create unique, and it's inherently local, right? Because it's about your experience at that specific location, content that you can then mark up with structured data that can be used to sort of improve your visibility, improve your ranking, and also improve conversion rates. As we see, 75% is frankly a staggering number, right? Saying that first party reviews are likely to influence their purchase decision. So again, I think we're in the early stages of this trend, but it's something that, especially given this feedback, we expect to see become the norm going forward for brands that are, making the best use of digital tools to improve visibility and conversions.
Great, thanks. So moving along here, two industries, business services and retail. Online reputation was found to influence the purchase decision, most often. Why do we think reputation in these two industries specifically mattered more than maybe some of the others? And I know we kind of touched on this a bit earlier, but what are your thoughts? Ryan, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I think again, it goes back to the sort of the pandemic impact. And one thing just to note, I know we have this labeled as business services, but this actually includes, it might even be more appropriate to say service businesses, right? Because this includes things like, salons, home service businesses, right? Things like lawn care and pest control. And so if we look at it that way, it makes more sense, right? That vertical would outstrip the others in terms of online reputation. Obviously, if you're inviting someone into your home, or if you're going to have someone cut your hair, right, you're going to maybe spend a little bit more time reading reviews and understanding the online reputation. Again, I think the pandemic impact of seeing restaurants and hotels further down the list is somewhat of a surprise, and likely has to do with just sort of the where these verticals exist in our sort of list of priorities day in, day out for the last 18 months, right? It's maybe less common. So again, knowing that we're refreshing this data annually, I'd be very curious to see how this changes over the next 12 months.
Yeah, I agree. I think that covers things pretty well here. We've got a question. Just wanted to jump on here. Someone asked about, this is specific to healthcare, but about rebranding a location or obtaining a new, maybe I think, listing that used to be under a different brand. So the way I take it is maybe there was an acquisition of some type, and a brand has a new name. What's the best process that we can just kind of touch on at a high level, assuming that there's a listing existing, I think?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think, technically, if we look at, Google's guidelines from a GMB standpoint, the guidance would be if there's a change in ownership and the brand is changing, that you actually create a new GMB listing and mark the previous listing as permanently closed. That would be, the guidance directly from Google on how to handle a transition like that.
Yeah, and I think that there's a big advantage there when you think about it too. If there's a new, a completely new brand, having that fresh start, not necessarily having, reviews, let's say, follow that may not be aligned with the new brand, if you will.
Yeah, and I think that's how Google's looking at it, right? Is all of that content, the photos, the reviews, everything that's associated with that listing, is relevant to the experience of the previous brand, right? And so, whether good or bad, it's the guidance is really to start fresh with the new ownership. That said, if if the brand that you're acquiring has a lot of authority and has a good reputation, it can make sense to integrate that content into, whether it's the GMB description on your listing, just so that folks aren't confused when they Google the address and expect to see the old brand, but also on page in the content of the landing page for that location. I think it makes sense to mention, the former brand again, if you're trying to sort of capture search volume or tell a consistent story to consumers as to what happened to that old brand that they were expecting to see there.
Great. So moving, there's some key takeaways here that again we're going to send this deck out, so I'm not going to cover those in detail, but we're going to close today's discussion talking about a very popular topic these days for many local marketers. How is COVID-19 and the Delta variant impacting local search behavior? From our survey findings, we see consumers are now searching more often for home delivery and business information along those lines, given the impact of COVID. Do we expect this type of search behavior to continue, given the Delta variant and flu season coming up? And has consumer shopping behavior been altered permanently? Doug, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I mean, I personally think that behavior has been altered permanently. We won't know, I think, until some more time has passed. But I can say, in my own personal experience, that the kind of the evolution that occurred across local search as a result of the pandemic and the additional sort of enhanced information and transactional attributes and features and things that are available with local listings and available to consumers in general, everything from retail, ordering ahead, picking, curbside pickup, same thing with restaurants. All of these things I feel have just sort of given us a taste of being able to be more efficient with our time and being, just a taste of additional convenience that we didn't have before. And once the pandemic passes and things are back to a relative normal state, I feel like a lot of people are going to continue to leverage those, and they're going to want to continue to leverage those opportunities. That's just my personal POV. It's my personal take on it. And obviously time will tell.
I agree with you, Doug. I think it these shifts are here to stay, right? I think it'll probably the sort of the level of demand for some of these things will likely kind of back off from the highs that we saw really at the height of the pandemic. But in the data that we're seeing across our client base and otherwise, we're still we're not through the pandemic by any means, right? But we're certainly we're backing away from sort of the height of restrictions and lockdowns, et cetera. And we're still seeing demand for these services, home delivery, curbside pickup, virtual services. We're still seeing that outstrip 2019 numbers across the majority of our client base as well. So I do think these numbers will remain elevated going forward.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I think the pandemic accelerated,
Yeah,
for many brands, accelerated things that they've had kind of on their roadmaps for maybe years. Things like advancing some of their mobile presence with apps, or just technology that integrates into the online ordering experience. The obviously we talked about curbside pickup and buy online, pick up in store. The convenience of some of those types of capabilities are appealing to consumers. It makes their lives easier, right? And so when you look at it with that lens, I think that in itself really is good evidence that some of these types of things that kind of really got more critical mass during the pandemic are here to stay.
Yeah.
So we're approaching the end here, but again, there's some key findings, key takeaways that we'll share out after the call and on each of the sections we've gone through. But what final takeaways or closing thoughts, Doug and Ryan, would you leave brands with based on the research findings we discussed? Ryan, you want to start us off?
sure. Yeah, I mean, I think to a pretty significant degree, this reinforced a lot of the kind of the best practices that we at Rio, and I know other kind of thought leaders in the space have been talking about for some time. Obviously, the foundation of optimizing that Google My Business listing, right? Google being by far the number one most visible place that your brand is being seen. For most brands, more visible than your own website, right? If you look at the impressions and engagement that happens in GMV versus web traffic, Google is actually seen more frequently, right? So making sure that you're treating Google, I think it was Mike Blumenthal that coined this phrase, but treating Google as your homepage, right? That includes optimizing all elements of your GMB profile, but also responding to reviews, right? Participating in that conversation, but also depending on the vertical, making sure you've got calls to action. You're leveraging Google Posts to share updates, to share promotions and events, and integrating product inventory, or for restaurants, your menu and the ability to order online. Just making that customer journey, removing as much friction, right, from that journey as you possibly can by putting all of the information that folks are looking for directly in your GMB listing.
That's great. Thanks, Ryan. Doug, what are your key takeaways?
Once again, I should always go first, because
sorry, Doug.
Ryan didn't leave me anything else to add to that. I think he covered it again really well. I just kind of reiterating a point you touched on earlier, Mick, that a lot of brands had initiatives on the back burner heading into the pandemic, that they were forced to very quickly accelerate their progress and adapt essentially to the new local experience that ensued from that. And the lesson learned there is, I mean, if you're not already on board and up to speed and have a robust local search strategy in place that incorporates everything that Ryan just very nicely articulated, then of course it needs to become a priority. If it already is a priority, it needs to remain a high priority moving forward, because to the points that we made earlier, much of this, I think it's fair to guess is indicative of permanent changes across the local web and local consumer experience going forward, even post-pandemic. So I just think it's just a reminder to really maintain the appropriate level of priority on your local search, local SEO program overall.
Great. Yeah, I building on what both of you said, obviously reaffirming that Google is the dominant player in local search. That's no surprise, but Google is constantly changing and coming out with new features and capabilities. And so staying ahead of that curve and implementing some of these new features or attributes that make sense for your business is definitely something to be aware of and focus on. And then in other verticals, in certain verticals, don't forget about Yelp and Bing, or Nextdoor if you're a service business. Apple Maps is, I think, becoming, they're rolling out new features that are more Google-like. And so we know there's a lot of iPhone users out around the country and around the world, that it's important to keep on top of what Apple's doing, and making sure your presence there is as valuable as it can be. Obviously, reviews really matter. We knew that. We know it's part of the local search algorithm even, but I think the survey does a good job of illustrating that things like responding to reviews and first party reviews really are important as well. Having a brand that responds to reviews is more likely for a consumer to trust a brand, but also I think it opens the door to leaving more reviews, because if they know that their reviews matter, I think consumers are going to be more likely to leave reviews. And then as both Ryan and Doug touched on, these new ways to interact and transact with businesses, that start with a local search, they're definitely here to stay. So if you haven't taken advantage of some of these, or some of them are still kind of in the works, definitely make it a priority. So that wraps up things for today. We've covered a lot of ground, and we hope you found our study's findings very useful. If there are any questions we didn't get to, we'll make sure to follow up afterward with each individual, and we'd also be happy to answer any questions you didn't have a chance to ask. So if you'd like to shoot us a note, feel free at marketing@rioseo.com. So again, marketing@rioseo.com. I'd like to thank everyone, all attendees, for joining. We're very excited about this study, and we want to make sure that we share it, the findings, as widely as we can. So thank you all. Also, thanks Doug and Ryan for taking the time to be with us today and sharing all of your great insights. We'll be sending out a recording and a copy of the study, as well as the slides, so you can dive deeper into the content, and feel free to follow up with us again with any questions. Thanks again. It was my pleasure to moderate today's discussion. We host these types of local search discussions every month, and hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Yeah, thanks. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.